I'm Carrie. I'm on the Andersons events team, and I just want to take a quick second to welcome you to our event tonight with Mary Alice Monroe in conversation with Debbie Macomber. Thank you all for being here tonight. The Andersons family has been selling books independently since 1875. And so we have made it through some tough times before, and we are going to make it through this tough time as well. But we just wanted to let you know that your support of Andersons, your support of this event by attending tonight, and your purchase of the book through us allows us to remain in business, and we are truly grateful for it. A couple of things about tonight before we get started. As mentioned previously, your cameras and microphones are off for the duration of the event because it cuts down on that on distraction for the authors who are speaking and for each other, but also on dreaded Zoom lag. It really makes Zoom run a lot smoother. So just go ahead and keep those off if you wouldn't mind. We will still have a Q&A session at the end though. So if you could please submit questions at any time through the chat, I'll be collecting those questions and I'll pop back on at the end and I will give them to the authors for you guys. And we'll get through as many as we can before our time together tonight ends. And on that note, I will say this. These virtual events, they just run so much smoother when you guys ask lots of questions. It's just more engaging. It makes it a little more fun. I know we're all missing it in person events. So if you ask questions, that's one way just to make it a little more feel like you're in person and actually speaking with your favorite authors. So I highly recommend that. For some reason, people are kind of shy in this virtual format. So I just want to encourage you to go ahead and be submitting them at any time that they occur to you throughout the conversation that the authors are having. One more thing, if you ordered a book for tonight, please know that you'll receive an email when your books are either ready to pick up or have shipped, depending which option you chose. And I just want to give you guys a heads up that sometimes this takes us a day or two. You might not hear from us for a day or two, and that is simply because we have an actual human being who processes these orders, and you know, we don't have robots and machines, so sometimes it just takes us a day or two to get through them all. So I'm just letting you guys know, if you have not ordered a book for tonight, I will be putting a link throughout the chat a few times throughout the evening where you can order more copies. I want to remind you, it's dads, grads, and summer season, weddings, showers, all that sort of stuff, and signed books just make a fabulous gift. So keep that in mind. Okay, I think I'm done with my boring part. Let's get to the good stuff. We are here tonight, of course, with Mary Alice Monroe. She is the New York Times best-selling author of 27 books, including her latest novel that we're here to talk about tonight, The Summer of Lost and Found, and her first middle grade book, The Islanders. Monroe's books have been published worldwide. She's earned numerous accolades and awards, and her best-selling novel, The Beach House, is also a Hallmark Hall of Fame movie. She is the co-founder of the hit web show and podcast Friends in Fiction. An active conservationist, she lives in the low country of South Carolina. And she is here tonight in conversation with Debbie Macomber, who is a #1 New York Times best-selling author and one of today's most popular writers, of course, with more than 200 million copies of her uplifting books in print worldwide. Macomber's novels have spent over 1,000 weeks on the New York Times bestseller list, with 13 of them hitting the #1 spot. What great company we are in tonight, I have to say, ladies. Welcome. Thank you for being here. I am going to disappear for a little bit, but I'm right here if you need anything.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carrie.
Well, hey, Debbie.
Hey, Mary Alice.
So good to see you.
And you too. I need to kind of preface this by saying that I have been a big fan for a lot of years and have followed your career. I loved how you put your passions into your writing and how that passion just really resonates with readers, and the love that you have for nature. And so, and besides, you and I have something else very much in common. I mean, other than the Hallmark movie, we have a star in. You want to tell them who it is?
Andy McDowell.
Yes, yes. And Mary
Yeah.
Alice and I were together with Andy for a big event. It was. She's such a wonderful person all the way around, and it was just it was so great to be with the three of us together. Yeah,
It was. By the way, I'm a big fan of the Cedar Cove series, and do you think they'll ever have a recap movie? I mean, will they ever pull it together again? Because I'm one of many people who were sorry to see that wonderful series end.
oh, who knows, the future. Who would have thought a year ago, that
That's right. That's
You know,
right.
So
Absolutely.
yeah, and speaking of a year ago, when you wrote this book, you wrote it during the pandemic with all the social distancing and everything else. How did that affect your writing?
It was the hardest book, Debbie, that I've ever written. It's because I wrote it in real time. And, my whole process had to change because, I'm not a pants in how we are plotters or pantsers, which means we write by the seat of our pants. I'm a plotter. And I'll ask you after this what you are, because for me, every book I've written, it's about research and working with the wild species and pulling it all together and then creating a story. But a year ago, when we had the shelter in place order, I was up in my mountain house in North Carolina, and I was just stuck with my niece, who was out of a job because she's in the service industry. And as you know, all of us had book tours canceled, and the world shifted. The world, not just personally, but in terms of our careers. And I couldn't go out and do the research that I was going to do. And I really thought long and hard, what am I going to write about? What am I going to do? And it might have been, people have called my decision to use the pandemic as a setting for the book somewhat grave. And because it is the first one that's come out, it's the very first one. I like to think it was also somewhat naive. Because yes, the pandemic affected the way I wrote this book. I was writing it in real time.
Can you explain what you mean by real time?
That means,
That
that's a great question. I use that, and actually, I hope everyone understands when I use that term. Real time means I was living it, observing it, and writing a story at the same time I was living it. It wasn't like usually you have a story idea, you work out the plot, the synopsis, you know where you're going to go. This was seat of the pants. I just went for it. And I trusted my instincts that it was the right time to do this, that I wanted. It just seemed like such a ripe moment in history, like a wartime. You don't ask for a war. If the bombs start to fall, you're in it. And the emotions are heightened, and everything about your life is challenged physically as well as emotionally. And I do think that this last year will be a defining year in our history, where people will say, where were you in the year of 2020? Don't you? Just like they say, where were you when the Twin Towers fell? Where
Kennedy died.
Where were you?
Older than you.
No, sweetheart. When I knew, I can tell you where I was when JFK was shot. It was one of those life-changing moments. And that's what people are going to say about 2020. And I felt it was important to chronicle it, not about the disease or politics or any of that, but about the interpersonal relationships, which, you and I both write about.
Well, as a result, it came about with Friends in Fiction. And
yes.
And so it made changes in our lives as writers too.
Very much so. Friends in Fiction was one of the highlights that came out of the pandemic. That's when Mary Kay Andrews, you know all these people because you've been on the show. You were one of our very first guests. And Mary Kay Andrews and Patty Callahan Henry and I got on the phone and talked to each other as friends. And what are we going to do? And then I knew Kristen Harmel and Christy Whitson Harvey because they're gallery authors with me. And I knew they were in the same boat. So we all started talking. And that was the funny thing. Someone said, let's gather on Zoom. And what's a Zoom? What is that?
Yeah, so exactly. We didn't know.
We didn't know what a Zoom was. And so, you mean FaceTime? So my 30-year-old niece who was living with me put it together. It was really funny. You'll laugh now because we are so sophisticated with ring lights and all that. But I was sitting outside because they said natural light was good. But of course, the sun starts setting and my face is getting darker and darker. And so since then, we've learned a lot. And Friends in Fiction has really taken off. But for me, writing this book, any outline I might have had, and I did have one, hit the garbage can pretty quickly, just right out. And I started observing not only the people that I lived with. My 4 sisters joined me at the mountain house, and we were all living together. And it was interesting back in the nursery, a lot of stories to tell. But I was also observing my young daughter, you probably did too, trying to help their children go to school with a laptop through substitute teaching. And I realized as I was living through it that a lot of my experiences were going into the book. So it became very personal. And even though it's a wonderful story of the Rutledge family in the series, and it continues to the next generation, there is a plot, is a story, and there is a denouement at the end. But writing it took every bit of talent and craft that I had. But Debbie, I pulled it off. I really feel at the end of this book, I had something to say through my characters and through the plot about this remarkable year. And the title says it all. We lost things, and I lost family members. The characters lost things. But we also found great joy, great moments, great new self-direction, a lot of perhaps self-reflection about what are we going to do with our lives now that we're coming out of it? And that's the key question.
So having your sisters with you there,
yeah,
did that influence your writing and the plot?
Yes, what a good question. Thank you. I didn't know it at the time. I didn't invite them for that reason. But I was here as in this mountain house, and my sister in Chicago, locked up in a condo. I said, come to the mountains. And then my sister in LA, locked in a condo. I said, come to the mountains. And my niece and me, the 4 of us lived together. And in the beach house, in this novel, the legacy of the beach house came out in that it's where women go for a sanctuary. That's what the beach house really is. And at the opening of the book, Linnea, the next generation, she's 25. She gets furloughed. You know, she loses her job like so many young people, like so many people of all ages did. And Kara, her aunt, and it's a mentor, more of a closer perhaps than her mother relationship, is renting her the beach house. So it's sort of moved on to another generation. And Linnea calls her aunt, and there's this moment where she says, I don't have a job. And Kara says, well, how are you fixed for money? She says, I have no savings. And Kara said, look, take it easy. I've got your back. You don't have to pay rent. This is what the legacy of the beach house, women helping women. It's what we do. It's what we Rutledge women do. If you're blessed, you pay it forward. And that's the whole story in motion, where she brings. So I had Linnea bring people into the beach house. There's her friend Annabelle, her brother Cooper, who comes home from England, we're studying, and he doesn't want to live with mom and dad. Please don't make me live with mom and dad. And so he lives with his sister and her boyfriend. And I thought it was really interesting during this time that we were shutting down our borders. Yeah. So he was trying to get in from England to get to her. And so he goes to the beach house. And next door, a boyfriend that she used to have, it broke her heart, was visiting his mom, got stuck in quarantine. Remember quarantine? That's quarantine. So a love triangle is started, and it sets off a lot of the action in the novel.
That is really great. Who came up with the title?
Oh, another good question. I had a couple titles, and they just didn't work by the time I finished the book. And sometimes when we have a chats on Friends in Fiction before, before a show, we're just talking and we brainstorm. And Kristen Harmel is excellent at coming up with titles. Debbie, if you ever need a title, go to Kristen. She came up with the title, and it's so perfect about what we lost, but all the things that we found. And she made a point in her review that I thought was so important. And she said, it's a timely book, that the pandemic is the setting. Like I used to have sea turtles as a backdrop, or I would have dolphins or the animal I studied. In this book, the backdrop for all the interpersonal relationships, mother, daughter, there's the love triangle, there's the older generation taking care of the younger generation. All that goes on against a backdrop of this pandemic.
Now, one of the characters, Florence, you talk about the Alzheimer's disease.
Yeah.
Do you have any experience with that? Is there anybody in your life?
Yes, I did. My father-in-law passed of Alzheimer's. And what was really sad was during this whole experience, my eldest brother, my first brother, in our family to pass, he had Lewy bodies disease, which is what Robin Williams had. And it's a degenerative disease where you have dementia go very quickly. It's usually 8 years from diagnosis to death. And he was slipping into dementia quite quickly. And I used it in the book because he had to go into a memory care center and in California, and COVID broke out. And he got COVID.
Oh, he did.
And he did. And what was sad is he was sick and no one could be with him.
Yeah.
And he passed. And my mother-in-law didn't have COVID, but she had what we call the dwindles, 96. And we couldn't see her for that final year. So I know loss, but I also realize, and that's why I put that in the book, but I also feel as a result, gratitude.
Yeah.
Because I have my health, my children are well. And so you have to look forward, not back. And I think that's one of the lessons we learned in this year, and my characters learned.
I wanted to tell you one of the funny things I did when I was writing category romances. Searching for titles was always a hassle. I found racehorse names. I used racehorse names, and they were.
You know what? I remember you telling me that once, and I thought, that's brilliant. So brilliant.
You'd be surprised how romantic they are.
I'll tell you, speaking of titles, I wrote The Beach House. It came out in 2002. Since then, 2, 3 other authors, and it was a New York Times hit. It was a big book. A whole series is based on it. And still authors come out with a book called The Beach House.
I know.
What the heck? Don't they do a search for titles? There's 4 titles. So anybody who wants to read my book, it's Mary Alice Monroe's The Beach House. I could write Gone with the Wind. So
yes, exactly. Or my favorite title is Tuesdays with Harry Potter.
That's excellent. See, we can do that, can't we? But we don't want to.
So my favorite title story happened with a book that was published many years ago called Susanna's Garden. And marketing they change my titles all the time. So they called me and they said, we're changing the title to Susanna's Garden. I said, great title, love that title. But there's 2 problems. There's nobody in the book named Susanna. And there's no garden.
Okay, that's hysterical. You do sometimes wonder if they ever read the book.
I know it. And by the way, I have to say, this is her book. Here it is right here, The Summer of Lost and Found. I looked on the New York Times list and it just leaped right on the very first week.
Thank you. I was so pleased. And it was a tough list, so I'm very grateful to the readers. I have to say, when the list, I've never known the list to be as hard as it's been this last year. It's just overcrowded, and everyone seemed to want to come out in May and June, and you're coming out in July. So, but you're number 1 multiple times.
You just want a 13th month is what we want.
We do. So I'm very grateful that the readers came up and showed up. You never take it for granted. You bite your nails every time.
I don't want to give too much of the plot away, but I want you to tell me why you decided to do the love triangle.
I don't think it was even a decision. It presented itself. I think a lot of what happened in this book was set up. And so on Ocean Boulevard, the one before, I had David, Kara's husband, going back and forth from England. England was in the book a lot, I think, because I spent a lot of time in England last year. But if the young boy, Cooper, her brother, Linnea's brother, had a lot of difficulty as a young man. And so he went to London to escape the South a little bit. And he went there to go to school to study. It's a great place for international business relations. And so he was there. So I set it up that Gordon's there, Cooper's there, and people were trying to get into the United States from London, and it just worked. And so then I thought to myself, there's this house next door. And she, it just worked out. The last book, John was trying to contact her a lot. So I said, what if he was visiting his mother and got stuck there? It just sort of happened. And I realized, triangle.
Yeah.
And I set it up, and it presented a lot of funny and amusing but heartfelt moments. But it also put Linnea in a position where she thinks during the whole book, who am I going to choose? And I swear, Debbie, I did not know who was I Team Gordon or Team John?
Oh.
And some of the people who had read the book were like, oh no, it has to be Team John or Team Gordon. I didn't know until I worked through the book. And it just was so obvious at the end, because John had a lot to prove in this book. He broke her heart, and she wanted nothing to do with him. But there's something about a low country boy that just, you just love him. And here you have this young man from England who's a marine biologist, brilliant, elegant man, great lineage. I mean, and yet at 26 years old, they're babies. Now, I was married, and I know you were married when we were 26. We were, in our generation, it was not unusual. But today I look at 26-year-olds and I know that, honey, you don't have to choose right now. What's going on here first? Mm-hmm. And I think during this year of self-reflection and redirection, I wanted to focus on no man's going to save you. Yeah. Ultimately, you save yourself. You make that choice.
So now that you've written, you say you're a plotter, and now you've written a book by the seat of your pants. Do you think you'll do another?
Never. Are you a plotter or a pantser?
I have a theory about writers. I'm a plotter, and it's because I'm a storyteller. And so plotting is my very favorite thing, but I had to learn to be the writer. So when my writing skills were par with my storytelling ability is when I sold. And then there are the people that are natural born writers, and they are the ones that have to learn how to tell a story. And because they get so caught up in the beauty of their words. And then the third kind are the people, and they're rare, who are very, very talented, and they possess both the storytelling ability and the writing ability, and they almost always sell quickly. And unfortunately, at writers' conferences, I say they have not suffered enough. Because they have this early success, and so much pressure has put on them that they don't know what they did right.
Yeah.
And they don't have that foundation. They haven't had that growth or that learning period of what it really means to create story. So,
well, you and I both know what it means to have a deadline.
Oh yes.
And I mean, you've doubled. I mean, how many books have you written? I mean, it's way more than me.
Heavens, I don't even know, because
but a lot
of books.
A lot.
But
and
I've been published 40 years too.
That's right. And me, not as much, but 30. So it's a lot. And
Yeah.
I think both of us are disciplined. It's not, anytime there's sort of a pejorative sense of, well, a book a year, how good can it be? I always like to remind people, number one, I feel that when you're under that deadline and you really care about you're working really hard. And sometimes people who say took me 10 years to write a book, I just don't know why you're writing 12 hours a day like we are. But the other things I like to remind people is, when you have a passion for a subject or a story, a hero of mine is John Steinbeck, who really wanted to affect change in his life. And let me remind people that he wrote 5 of his best-selling, biggest, huge tomes in 5 years.
Wow, I didn't know that.
And it's
you
important.
were instrumental in, I'm almost getting to meet Pat Conroy.
Oh, honey, I tried.
I know.
He died too soon.
Oh,
We still feel the loss, and I know you loved him, and
oh,
I wanted to make that happen. I still feel his loss. You know, he haunts me. He leaves me pennies. He wants me to write the book. I know what he wants me to write.
What does he want you to write? Are you going to tell us?
You can read it in about 2 years.
Okay. Oh, suspense. Keep us on our toes here. Oh, that's wonderful.
But I wanted you to meet him. But who else? Do you have someone you want to meet that you think, oh, I'd love to meet that writer?
Well, they're mostly gone. So.
Isn't that true?
Yeah. Because most anybody now, before we could meet them, we did have the opportunities because there were so many book fairs and events and ways to meet other authors.
Right.
Yeah. So.
And right now, I just started book tour, and it's very, I'm enjoying doing the conversations, but the book tour is very limited. I'm up in North Carolina now doing a speaking event this weekend, and it's still very limited in the number. Where you used to speak to large groups, now you speak to small groups, and yet it's so great to see the readers again. It's so great to have the one-on-one. You miss it. You really do. Because you and I, pardon me?
They feed us.
They do.
Yeah, they encourage
and they tell us their stories. And what I love too is we spend so much time in our head writing, and alone a lot of the time, where it's a very isolated lifestyle. But when we get to go out and see the readers, we hear it's validation, and it's seeing someone who they're connecting with story.
Yes, and the power of story.
Yes.
So let me see if I have another question here for you. The paper airplanes. I really loved that. How did you come up with that idea?
Oh, well, John was trying for a year to text her, to email her, to call her. She refused all communication with him. So when she comes out and she looks up, and this house actually exists. In fact, Andy McDowell was at my house just a couple days ago, and we were talking, and I showed her the real beach house. And I said, there's the door. Next door is Flo's house with Emmy. And up on the second floor is it's like a peachy orange, very southern, coach house window. Like you could open it with two, what do you call it? Like a door, like a double door. Sorry, I must be getting tired.
Balcony.
So I said, that's where John stood. And so Linnea looks up and she sees, oh no, what's he doing here? And that feeling, but she can't deny and he's like, and he takes a paper airplane and he shoots it down, and she reads it, and it's poetry, and of course, and little comments, and she's so angry at her heart for responding, that he betrayed her. And I was shocked to learn that my grandchildren did not know how to make a paper airplane.
Oh.
So, isn't that a shock? They just don't do that. And the symbol of the paper airplane was not only for communication, but do you remember the movie Forrest Gump?
Oh,
when they had the feather at the beginning. I always loved that sense of whimsy and serendipity. And I wanted that paper airplane to indicate there's joy here. There's fun here. There's a little serendipity going on despite everything.
It was brilliant. It was a brilliant idea.
Thank you.
Brilliant idea. Now, I got my grandkids paper chains to make for Christmas.
Oh my
gosh. And they'd never seen anything like that. So,
oh my gosh, we have to raise our grandchildren to show them what to have a good time, the old school, like puzzles. Well, isn't that part of what we did during this season? This whole year is puzzles. I know my children played board games because they didn't want their kids in front of a screen any more than they already had
to be. Yes.
And the other thing that I thought was fun for me with kids, I wanted to explore the exotic in the backyard. I'm not looking at whales.
Oh,
I'm
uh-huh.
looking at what's at the bird feeder, and I love that scene where they're all in the backyard and he's building a pond. John's a nice guy and building a pond. A lot of people improved their gardens. I
Yeah,
built a victory garden,
yeah.
and y'all know what a victory garden is. I had some young people in an audience who didn't know what a victory garden was. I guess I aged, told my age. But there's a scene where the little child Hope, and there is a little girl in it.
Mhm.
What's that noise? And there was a joke about, well, it's an alligator, because if you've ever heard an alligator bellow, you don't forget that sound. And yet a toad can have a pretty big
Oh,
bellow.
amazing.
And it was a bullfrog. And well, that's our bullfrog. A bullfrog? Yeah, it's Jeremiah. You have a bullfrog named Jeremiah? Yeah, and there's even a song about it. So if they get the song in the phone, and it's just the joke, and it's just the adults are playing, and it was one of those relaxed moments that we had a lot of, when we're out by the fire or out, just talking in the garden. Those are the
You
good
grow a garden?
moments.
Did you grow a garden?
I call it my $7,000 broccoli, because I was up in the mountains, and I'm on a mountaintop, so we don't have a lot of land, which is a good thing, but it's also bad if you want to have a garden. And I love to garden, get my hands in the dirt. So I had to, there's a circle of mountain around the side. I had to cut back all the trees because they could have fallen on the house. There's that, but also to create sun. And after I got the sun, okay, let's plant raised beds. So we put in 5 raised beds, filled them with soil. And then the first thing we did was lose everything to the deer. So then you got to build a deer fence, right? And it
Yes,
can't be 4 feet, it has to be 8 feet tall.
yes, it
So
does.
so it's a very expensive victory garden, but it saved so my $7,000 broccoli.
I had to build a deer fence around our garden too, so I know exactly what you mean,
Oh,
8 feet tall.
there's nothing more staggering than to see all your vegetables chewed down to everything, just nubs, gone.
And they ate the broccoli?
Oh, yeah. But I replanted. Thank goodness they got it when it was this big. And I got another batch in because I had to buy the already started plants, which is even more expensive than the seeds I started.
Yes. Well, we are staying out here on Hood Canal, and so we've had to rebuild our garden because the other garden is at the other house. So.
Oh, well, having a garden, and that's why I put a garden in the book for little Hope to stick her little fingers in there and plant the seeds.
Yes.
Everything. See, what I did fed what I put into the book.
Yeah.
So it really was very personal. It was.
So what's next? What are you writing next?
Well, the Islanders, did we talk about that? I think I get confused from one book to one interview. The Islanders is my middle grade book, and I'm doing the next in that series. So I've always wanted to write it middle grade, and it's been 2 years in the writing, but this last year really kicked up the time because I was home, not on book tour.
Right.
And it's middle grade is ages 8 to 12. And I love these kids, Debbie, because they are the stewards of tomorrow. They have such faith that they can do anything. The world, climate change, we can make a difference. They really believe. They're out there in the beach sweeps picking it up.
Yeah.
So I wanted to write a story for this generation, but to put them in a situation where they unplugged, especially after this last year.
Yes.
And I brought 3 kids to a real island. Next time you come to Isle of Palms, I'll take you there. Okay. It's right off Isle of Palms. It's called DeWeese, and it's accessible only by boat, by a ferry. There are no cars, no stores. And for these 3 children, no Wi-Fi, because grandma doesn't believe in it. And you have an army brat from New Jersey who, lived all over, and his dad was injured. So he's being sent to his grandmother's house. And he's like, oh, I got to spend the summer with my grandmother. And then an African-American boy from a wealthy family in Atlanta is there, and he has his issues. And then the little girl from Beach House series, her name is Little Lovey. She's 10 years old. She's there. And they would not be friends if they were in Chicago or Atlanta or anywhere else. But alone on this island, it's a wildlife sanctuary with alligators and turtles and wild birds. They became friends. And this is the key. They're complaining, they're bored, what's nothing to do because they don't have electronics. Then the magic happens. And I've seen this in my own kids, and I'm sure you have. Their imagination takes root. They go out and explore. They create forts, so they have fun. They get in a little trouble, but in the end, it's the best summer ever. And I just wanted, it was a great book to write.
Have you got a title?
The Islanders. That's what they call each other.
I think you ought to title it The Best Summer Ever.
Oh, well, where were you when I came up with the title? But it's really cute because at the very end, they keep trying the whole book, trying to figure out what's our group name. What the Three Musketeers, what do we call it? At the very end, the Islanders. So in a sense, we invite all little kids, truly, come be an Islander, because we're going to try and help kids in school. Schools throughout the country are adapting this book into their curriculums. And I am honored.
Wow.
I really am. It was, the reception's been amazing. And I think the deeper issue is the grandmother and the grandchild.
Yeah.
She's a little depressed. She lost her husband. Her son is sick. And she used to be the nature lady on the island, but the house is getting messy. The joke is he opens up the fridge and don't eat that. The mystery meat in the fridge. And Jake and his grandmother, who he calls Honey, they help each other. It's a beautiful grandmother-grandson relationship.
And when is this going to come out? I want to read it.
Thank you. You're getting a copy. I'll have it sent June 15th. So actually, I finished this tour.
Oh, it's really soon.
June 15th. So we begin, and I'm very excited.
Oh, you should be. You should be. I have grandkids that age that I know are going to.
I'll get you a copy. Yeah, thank you.
Please.
Thank you.
Yeah. Is there anything I didn't ask you that you wanted me to?
I want to know about your new book coming out in July. Tell me about it.
Oh, okay. It's called It's Better This Way. And I had to really fight for that title.
So, tell me, speaking of titles, what were the options? What made you choose that title?
They have been giving me these kind of generic titles: Walk Along the Beach, Cottage by the Sea. I mean, it doesn't really catch the essence of the book. And I don't remember what they chose, but I said, oh, please, please, please listen to me and title it, because it's so much part of the story. And it's about two divorced people who end up in the same condo building. Neither one of them had really wanted the divorce. Neither one of them are interested in a new relationship. And there's a big surprise and twist in it that will just kind of, when my granddaughter read it, and she said, Grandma, you really, really surprised me.
Bravo.
Yes. So, and it's a story about blending families and relationships, and it's probably the most romantic book I've ever written, because you just can't help but fall in love with these people.
I love romantic stories. I do. That's why I think that to put a love story into a book at any age, whether they're older or younger, enriches
these are older.
These are older. That's what I mean. Yeah. See, there you are. I like that. I think the only thing I have to say I feel badly in this book about is Emmy, who's been a good friend to everybody. So if I write another one, it's Emmy's turn, I think. This the true blue friend, whose husband divorced her a long time ago. She has she comes to realize what it is she needs and wants now at this turning point. And I don't know what's going to happen, but I think I'm going to give Emmy a chance for the next
one. Oh, good. And I think your readers are going to love that too.
They have to. You have to look at all the. You've written series, so do you ever have a series that you want to go back to?
It's sort of like dating an old boyfriend. You're kind of done. So I always look forward, but there are just so many people that always ask me to go back to Cedar Cove. So
Yeah.
I think at some point I probably will.
I'm delighted. That's one that I'd love to see it continue. I would.
Yeah.
That's the thing about series, you don't know you don't know exactly when a series should end, but I
Mhm.
think you have to trust your instincts. Like, I know my readers, as long as they want for the Beach House series to continue, I'll write it, because I don't want to say goodbye to the characters yet. I'm not ready. And I think I can't believe they're one another one. But then, I read about Jen Carone, we were talking with the Mitford series.
Mhm.
I'm a slacker compared to her. And yet each book, you can pick up any book in her series and
Right.
it's alone. It's a standalone. But if you read the whole series, it enriches it. And I think with the Beach House series, if you read, for example, The Lost and Found, it's the new generation. If you've never read my work before, it's a good one to start at. But if you like it, you have more to read. That's the way I look at it. And the same thing with Cedar Cove. If you write another one, everyone can read that one, but they're going to want to go back
Yeah.
and read them all.
I think like you, it's going to be the next generation.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
All right, ladies. I hope I didn't startle you. I always feel like I startled you.
No. Hi, Gary. Welcome back.
No.
Our time, let's see, we've got a little time, I think, to take some
Good.
questions from the audience, and we have some great questions. So let me get going on those. Sorry, I copied and pasted them over here. Here they are. Okay, so Mary, this one is going to be for you. And this
Okay.
is from Michelle. And she said, who would you envision or wish would play the characters in a movie version of Summer of Lost and Found?
Well, this is always one of my favorite games to play. I think
know,
all
it's
of us feel that way. Well, Kara, I think if I was moving forward with the Beach House series, and at 60 years old, Kara would be Andy McDowell, because
Yeah.
that's who I chose as Kara for the first one. And in the movie, she played the mother because she said, I can't play Nanjing now. But now that we're into the older years, I would make her the mother. For Emmy, I'm blanking on her name and I see her face. She was the redhead in the Waltons. My God, I love her to death. She's a friend of mine. I just blank.
Margaret McCormick.
No, but I know her. I'm sorry. She's going to be so brokenhearted that I did this. It's like forgetting my sister's name. It's been a long day. For Gordon, it would be Sean Evans. I created him because I love the Endeavor series. He's a British actor, redhead. Oh my God, he's so gorgeous. I wrote him just because I wanted him in my book. So that would be John. I'm not sure of. I'm going to ask for readers to tell me who that would be. And Linnea, I know a young actress. Her name is Levin Ramden, and you see her on a lot of TVs. I think she was in the Hunger Games, and she's definitely Linnea. And she said she would play the part if we ever get it going. So it's fun.
I love that question. It's always so much fun. I know.
I have fun, yeah.
This is from Anissa, sorry if I pronounced that wrong. And she says, what was your main inspiration? She's talking to you with this one, Mary, when you started this beautiful series 20 years ago.
Oh, that's such a good question. It was 20 years, and it's hard to believe. Doesn't it go by fast? I knew I wanted to write about sea turtles because my sister is an artist and she lives in Florida where there are a lot of turtles. And she described to me how when turtles lay their eggs, she was watching them, and she described how they cry, the tears. And so now I know it's the natural biological cleansing of the eye. That's boring. When I heard her, my body just went, I want to write about this because it's the metaphor of a mother's tears, giving birth, you saving your children. So I joined the turtle team, and that was the spur to write about sea turtle backdrop. And I learned a lot, but I also learned that sea turtles are in trouble 20, 30 years ago. And I honestly wanted the books to make my readers aware, to be a force for good, where they would be like Debbie was saying, I'm a storyteller. You care about the mother-daughter reconciliation. That backdrop would allow my readers to appreciate the situation the turtles were in and to care. And I knew when I met those people on the beach, they cared. And I thought if I could get them to understand, then they would start to take care. And that's been my mantra. And I'm happy to say it seems to be.
Yes, it does. It seems like maybe it took everyone a while to come around. I was also early into loving and supporting the sea turtles, and now I feel like everybody finally understands. So yes, that is.
I like to think maybe I'm a little part of that.
I think you are. I think that's great. Okay, this question is for both of you. You mentioned your group, was it Friends and Fiction?
Yes.
All right, so Anissa says, what has been the most special moment of FNF for you?
How did you start, Debbie? You were one of our very first guests.
Oh, well, it was one of the very first times I did Zoom too. So, I had been doing Zoom with my office, but to do something with other authors, it was so much fun to just be able to connect, because we'd been so isolated, and then to be able to connect with other authors and hear what they're doing and laugh with them. So that was a real highlight for me. It was just when I'm coming back, I think September. So I can hardly wait. Yeah.
It's a wonderful program. I think, to your point, what I love most about Friends and Fiction is the reaction we get both from the viewers who have said, I mean, I've been on book tour and people have said, thank you, you got me through the pandemic. With Friends and Fiction, it became a community that people could join and could feel like they weren't so isolated, and we're all book lovers. So that was a big point from the viewers. And then from the authors like you, Debbie, because I think there's a camaraderie on the set. Don't you think the authors feel comfortable?
Oh yeah.
And they answer the book questions, but there's always that kernel of something personal. And I remember, Debbie, with you talked about how it was almost, you put it about your dyslexia when you were young. Will you say that again? You said it so beautifully about how it was God's joke almost someone, how did you put that? We were all crying. It was so beautiful.
I don't know, just that it was kind of God's joke that he would take someone that didn't learn to read to the 5th grade and then, make them a best-selling author. I mean, it's kind of
crazy. I loved that. And it was that kind of honesty that we share that makes you feel like you get to know the author in a personal way. So that was my favorite part on the author side.
Oh, I love that. That's really inspiring too. Like, I feel like that's a message that needs to get out there more these days. So much pressure on kids right now to be, perfect and so smart, so young, and I just love that. Okay, this one is for both of you. This is from Donna, and she said, "What would you say is your interesting writing quirk?"
Oh gosh, I have so many. You start again, Debbie. I have to think about this one.
I know, that's kind of a tough one.
Well, I've always had a dog at my feet.
Oh, brilliant.
Yeah, there was Bogey, our little Shih Tzu, but he died in February, and I'm telling you, I didn't know anybody could grieve this hard for a dog.
Oh, I'm sorry.
I sympathize.
But last week we got 2 little puppies, and it's just amazing because both of them, it's like the spirit of Bogey. They are both laying down at my feet as I write.
Oh my goodness.
But they're not pooping and peeing.
So what kind of a dog did you get?
They're 2 Shih Tzus.
Shih Tzus. Oh, that is so sweet. Well, you'll be amused to know that 3 days ago, I co-breed Cavaliers, and we had 6 puppies, they're this big, little tricolor Cavaliers, and gorgeous. So my little boy Cosmo is a proven stud. Because it's usually you have 3 or 4, but he had 6. So I think he'll be in big demand. He's a gorgeous little boy, but I think having a dog at your feet is definitely a quirk. I mean, I don't know if I almost can't write without, and my canaries. So I'm not here, but if we were doing this in my office, the canaries, no matter how many cloaks I put over her sheets, over the cages, and I turn off the lights in that corner of the office. They hear my voice.
I love it. Oh,
That's really great. We're very dog friendly at Anderson's, well, pet friendly really. And I'm telling you, the minute a dog walks in the store, all productivity stops. I mean, I work down in the basement and people will call down like, there's a dog in the store, and like everybody goes up. I mean, there's just dogs and books that go together really well.
Yep,
So
yep.
cats. I want a bookstore cat, but they won't let me get one. All right, this one's also for both of you. This is from Erica, and she says, do you ever get writer's block? And if so, what do you do about it? But if not, why do you think you don't get it?
You know, there's a lot of debate about whether some authors don't believe in writer's block. I know there are times when you get stuck, and call it what you want. And I always feel at that moment, it's more that I need to get back into the research, that something is missing, that it's not that I'm stuck and can't go forward, but I don't want to go forward until I answer that. I write in a very linear fashion. I don't start at the beginning and like a film, you shoot. I write in chronologically. So if I'm stuck and I can't get there, then I go back and I want to find out, because my research inspires me. It sparks ideas. And so I don't know, I wouldn't call it a block. As far as future ideas, I literally right now have 6 books I want to write, all scoped out, like planes ready to go off. And I can't write fast enough. You know, I just, there's no shortage of ideas. It's time. I wish I could clone myself. I'm not as fast as Debbie. And I'm fast. I'm fast. Pardon me?
I learned that as a category writer, writing for category romance. You had to learn to write fast if you were going to make a living on your writing. So,
yeah, you are. It's a big discipline, and I admire that in you.
As for writer's block, you know, because I'm a plotter, I know every scene of the book before I sit down to write scene 1. So that is always the way I have worked. And just like you, if there is something, if I just have to go back, because it's the subconscious telling me that there's something wrong, and I have to go back and find out what it is before I can go forward. And if you call that writer's block, then I guess so. But I've never ever been, you know, put something aside and not finished it.
Yeah.
Wow. That's 2 very great answers. Thank you, guys. Mary, this one is for you. Did you have to change your writing process when you wrote your middle grade book, The Islanders? Which sounds fantastic, by the way.
Thank you. As a matter of fact, I did. It was my first collaboration ever. I wrote this with my, it's with Angela May, who's was an assistant, now a colleague, wonderful writer, but her dream was also to write a middle grade book. And knowing that, I said, do you want to give it a shot? Do you want to try? And I'm very territorial about my writing and my voice. So I thought, what am I going to do? But we worked out a system where I could, as long as she was okay with me ripping things apart and saying it the way I wanted it said, which she was, but she added her own gift to the book. So the process of handing things back and forth, I didn't think was going to work, but it did, because I happened to be lucky to have chosen the right person. And it's a big effort of trust too. Yes. So, and your ego has to be strong. So she's really good about setting up scenarios and research. And I'm good with, we both loved this island and we both wanted to tell this story. But she used to write things for my essays to spark an idea. And then I'd go in and rip it all apart and put my voice on it. So we sort of did the same thing. And the process really worked. But I would never do it with an adult novel.
Oh, that's really interesting. Yeah, I always do kind of wonder how that collaboration process works, especially when you get to like great authors together and like how you, yeah. So that was really interesting. Thanks. All right, I think we have time for one more question here, and it's a good one. So I saved it to the end, and I want to hear both of you weigh in on this. This is from Allison, and she says, thank you both for taking time to meet with us this evening. I have a story idea, and I would love any advice as a young aspiring author. So I would love you both to weigh in on that. Some good advice.
Do you want to start or do you want me to start?
You go ahead.
Ideas are wonderful. And I would encourage her to sit down and write it. Now, I didn't have a college degree. I barely made it out of high school. So you don't need to have, a college education to be a writer. You just have to have the heart for it. And I would encourage her to plot it out in advance. I think too many authors think if they just write by the seat of their pants, and it's fine, you can learn to do that, but it's difficult. It requires a lot of rewriting.
Get lost. Yeah.
Yes. And the way I used to do it years ago, it's a simple little technique. I would take a sheet of paper and I had the plot premise, and the plot premise, I always based it on words. And if the idea aligned with these words, then I knew I had a good idea. And the words are, it has to be relevant to the reader. It has to be provocative because I want the reader to think, put themselves in that place. It has to be told in the most creative way I can think to tell it. It has to be realistic, and it has to be entertaining. So if the plot will line up against those words, but what I would do is once I had the premise, I would take that sheet of paper and I would write out 20 ideas of things that could happen in that book that would form the story. And the first 10 were always easy. It's the last 10 that are hard. So that's my advice to you.
Good advice. And to take that another step, I think I do a lot of writer retreats where I teach. And I think I see a lot of writers, young writers, who work so hard at the beginning. They think everything, perfect at the beginning. And I just always want to say, you don't know you can write a novel until you get the beginning, the middle, and the end. And most of the time, we don't really know what the story is about until you get to about page 100. And something happens and you begin to, oh, wait, I know what the story's about now. So until you can finish a whole story, don't polish the first 3 chapters, because likely you're going to rip those apart or even throw them away. A common flaw for a lot of young writers is to tell, oh, the reader has to know all this before the story begins. Mm-hmm. Oh, no, that's called backstory. You just don't do it. It's about trusting the reader to wait. So tell what's the inciting incident and get going and write a beginning, a middle, and an end. And that's when that's your heart, as Debbie said. You get the guts out. Or as Anne Lamott said, that's the shitty first draft. You have my full permission to do that. Then you put your tool belt on. That's craft. And you can't write a good book unless you know your craft. And you go to school or you take books, you go to classes, you go online, learn your craft, because that's when you take that draft and you look at things like plotting and pacing and to polish it to be something that's valuable. So get that book down, get the whole thing down, write that really bad first draft.
That's excellent advice. Excellent advice. That's, it's funny because that's what I did when I started as a writer with the rented typewriter on the kitchen table.
Oh, yes.
I took the books I loved most and I dissected them. I wanted to know what it was that I loved so much about these stories. And so I just made it an outline, scene by scene, chapter by chapter. And that was how I learned plotting and pacing and backstory.
That's talk about ingenuity. Actually, I remember doing that to do you remember Robin Cook?
Oh, yes.
The medical thriller.
Right.
I remember I took whatever the title was, and I just wanted to know, because I remember reading going, the pacing in this book was so great. And I dissected it to find out what made the pacing so great, because they didn't have classes online at the time.
Right.
I was a mother with little babies at home. I couldn't go out at night.
Yeah,
so I taught
it wasn't dogs at my feet, it was kids.
It was kids.
Well, thank you guys. That was such both of you just provided such great answers. It's so amazing to have the opportunity to ask two such successful writers for writing advice. Like that's the kind of thing I love about these events. Like I get like goosebumps, I swear.
Well, we get to, plus Debbie and I got to see each other. How what a bonus.
Yes, exactly.
And we got to come to Anderson's, big double.
Yes, you got to come to Anderson's,
Yes.
which both of you have been to us many times before, but
We will again.
yes, and you will again. Absolutely. I can't wait till we can see you guys in person again. I just wanted to say thank you again to both of you for being here tonight. That was an amazing conversation. It was really fun to watch. And of course, I want to one more time say thank you to everybody out there for your support of Anderson's during this crazy time and for continuing to show up for events like this and purchase books and just keep reading out there.
And they're signed books, aren't they?
They are. Tonight's books will be signed, so definitely order tonight because signed books, especially this year with the book plates, I feel like everyone's going to know like, oh, that was a signed book from like 2020 or 2021 because, you know, they're all book plate signed, which I think gives them like a little special touch. Yes. But other than that, I just want to say we are almost there, guys. I really feel like we're almost out of this crazy time, and please stay well out there. And I hope we're all together soon. Thank you and good night.
Thank you so much, Carrie. Debbie, bye. Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you both.